The roar was absolute. It was a wall of sound that stripped away thought, leaving only the raw, thrumming pulse of the earth. Savaha stood on the rocky edge of the basin, the spray 1,000 icy needles against her bare skin. She was 19, her body lithe and untamed, glistening like a polished blade under the high sun filtered through the dome's leafy canopy. Behind her, Lyra and Kale were mere echoes, their laughter drowned by the waterfall's fury. She felt the wolf pacing behind her ribs, a restless, predatory energy from her shifter blood, evolved from the ancient wolf hybrids who bonded with human empaths after the blight. This natural evolution allowed her to shift forms, drawing on animal instincts for survival. But the quiet life inside the sky-root dome could never quite cage it. Today, that wildness surged stronger than ever, as if the air itself carried a promise of upheaval. The mist from the falls clung to her skin, cool and alive, stirring something deep within her, a prickling awareness, like the forest was watching, waiting. She tilted her head back, gazing up at the towering cliff where the waterfall plunged from the dome's higher reaches. The water cascaded in relentless sheets, white and furious, carving through the air like a living blade. High above, the vines and roots twisted in the wind, and for a moment, Savaha thought she saw a shadow flicker, too deliberate to be a bird, too bold to be an accident. Her raven instincts sharpened her vision, pulling details from the haze, the faint outline of a figure perched on the edge, muscles coiled like a predator about to strike. Her heart quickened, not with fear, but with a strange electric curiosity. Who would dare such a height? The drop was legendary among the shifters, a test of nerve whispered about in the groves, a plunge that could shatter bones or forge legends. Lyra called out something teasing, but Savaha barely heard her. The wolf in her growled low, sensing the shift in the wind, the subtle change in the waterfall's rhythm. Then, the sky broke. The silhouette detached itself from the towering heights. Not a bird, but a man. He didn't hesitate. He leapt with deliberate grace, his body arching into a perfect dive, arms extended like wings, dark hair whipping in the descent. Time seemed to stretch as he plummeted through the white veil of the falls, a dark comet of muscle and defiance slicing through the mist. Savaha's breath caught, her eyes locked on his form, broad shoulders cutting the air, legs straight and powerful, every line of him screaming control amid chaos. He wasn't falling, he was diving into the throat of the world, challenging the very force of the earth with his shifter's audacity. The wind howled around him, the spray exploding outward as he pierced the veil, and Savaha felt a visceral pull in her chest, as if her own empathic senses were tethered to his reckless flight. Crack! The sound of him hitting the surface was like a bone-deep fracture, echoing through the basin and vibrating in Savaha's bones. The pool didn't just splash, it hemorrhaged. A geyser of turquoise and foam exploded upward, a violent crown of water that slammed into Savaha, knocking the air from her lungs and drenching her from head to toe. The cold shock raced across her skin, awakening every nerve. But she stood firm, her feet rooted like the ancient trees of the sky-root. The silence that followed was suffocating, broken only by the fading roar of the falls. The surface of the pool churned, white and frothing, bubbles rising in frantic bursts as if the water itself were alive and protesting the intrusion. Seconds stretched into an eternity. Savaha's heart pounded, her wolf instincts urging her to shift, to dive in after whatever fool had tempted fate. Lyra gasped behind her, and Kale muttered something about madness, but Savaha ignored them. Her gaze pierced the depths, searching for movement, for life. "He's dead!" Kale's voice drifted through the mist, hollow and horrified. Savaha didn't move. She couldn't. Her raven eyes, sharp and piercing from her empathic shifter heritage, were fixed on the center of the deep. She felt a sudden, violent shift in the air, a pressure, a localized storm of intent building beneath the surface. Her skin prickled with a heat that had nothing to do with the sun, as if the man's energy was reaching out, brushing against her own like invisible threads weaving together. The water didn't just ripple, it parted with explosive force. He rose like a god reclaiming his throne, breaking the surface in a surge of power that sent waves rippling outward. Water streamed from his dark hair, plastered to the sharp, cruel angles of a face that promised trouble. High cheekbones, a jaw like carved stone, eyes burning with unquenched fire. Droplets sluiced off his broad shoulders, tracing the hard, ridged map of his chest, the powerful swell of his arms, and the taut lines of his abdomen, each muscle defined by the exertion of the dive. He looked dangerous, primal, alive in a way that made everyone else seem like faded shadows. His skin gleamed in the sunlight, steam rising faintly from the heat of his body against the cool water, and Savaha could scent him even from afar. Ozone, crushed fern, and a deep, masculine musk that stirred her wolf to full alertness. He didn't gasp for air or flail. He emerged with predatory calm, treading water effortlessly, his gaze scanning the shore. He didn't look for safety. He looked for her. Through the shimmering haze of the mist, his eyes, dark, turbulent, and absolutely focused, locked onto hers. The world narrowed until there was nothing but the two of them in the thundering water. Savaha felt the empathic pull intensify, a raw, unspoken recognition that hummed through her veins like the resonance chants of the elders. It was as if their shifter souls had brushed in that moment, testing, challenging. Savaha stood her ground, her chin tilted up, her nakedness no longer a vulnerability, but a challenge. She let him see her, the wildness, the hunger, the wolf prowling just beneath her skin, ready to shift and match his defiance. He moved through the water with a terrifying, predatory grace, his strokes powerful and unhurried, cutting through the pool like a raven slicing the sky. As he reached the shallows, he rose completely, the water cascading off his hips and thighs in rivulets that traced every curve and hollow. He was magnificent and raw, his body a testament to shifter strength, a mirror to the heat rising in her own blood. The air between them thickened, charged with the scent of wet stone and mutual awareness. He stopped so close she could feel the radiation of his skin, a furnace heat that made the cool mist hiss and evaporate. He smelled of ozone, crushed fern, and a masculine scent so primal it made her stomach flip, her empathic senses flaring to life, drawing her in like a moth to flame. "You're still here," he rasped. His voice wasn't a whisper, it was a vibration that settled in her marrow, low and heavy, carrying the gravel of someone who had just conquered the falls. "I wanted to see the man who thought he could outrun gravity," Savaha breathed, her words a dare, her voice steady despite the racing of her heart. She held his gaze, unflinching, feeling the first threads of the bond weave between them, an evolved pull that promised uniqueness amid the collective. Favian's gaze darkened. It wasn't a look, it was a claim. He didn't ask permission. He reached out, his hand wet and calloused, and cupped the side of her neck. His thumb dragged over her pulse point, feeling the frantic, erratic beat of her heart, sending sparks through her skin. The touch was electric, intimate, as if he were mapping her essence with his fingertips. "Gravity is a suggestion," he murmured, leaning down until his lips were a heartbeat away from her ear, his breath warm against her damp skin. "But this is inevitable." His free hand brushed her arm, trailing water and fire in its wake, and Savaha felt the wolf within her respond, urging her closer. He didn't kiss her. He didn't have to. The air between their bodies was already on fire, the empathic bond igniting like dry tinder. He turned his hand, sliding his palm against hers, his fingers weaving through hers with a possessive, crushing strength. The jolt was tectonic. It wasn't a spark, it was a lightning strike that mapped his soul onto hers, etching his name into the very architecture of her being through their empathic bond. "Favian," he growled into the hollow of her throat, his voice a rumble that vibrated against her skin. "Savaha," she whispered, her eyes closing as she felt the first chord of the bond snap into place, anchoring her to him with the weight of a mountain. It was more than attraction. It was the essential pairing her shifter nature craved, the key to her uniqueness in a world of collective harmony. Then, a sudden, wicked grin split his face. It was pure, unadulterated mischief, breaking the intensity like sunlight through storm clouds. "So, you think I'm easy to outrun?" Before he could pull back, a laugh bubbled up from deep within Savaha, wild and free. With a burst of pure, reckless joy, she shoved him. Not hard enough to hurt, but with enough force that he stumbled back, arms flailing dramatically, and with a delighted splash, he fell backward into the deeper water. Favian resurfaced, shaking his head, his hair streaming, his eyes alight with a fierce, answering joy. That smile, it was a promise, a challenge, an invitation to a life lived on the edge. Savaha didn't hesitate. With a feral cry, she plunged into the cold depths after him, every nerve singing with absolute exhilarating thrill. The water embraced her, just as Fabian's arms would a moment later, pulling her into a breathless, joyous dance where the world outside the waterfall ceased to exist. In that moment, she was utterly, perfectly alive. Her mate could not have made a more memorable entrance into her life, a joy she could smell, hear, and taste even after they parted that night. The scent of crushed white lilies and sacred ambergris was beginning to choke her, but nothing could weaken the scent that took root in her lungs. The scent of lightning and warmth. Savaha stood in the center of her family's living grove, her mother and aunts fluttering around her like nervous birds. They were draping strands of glowing vines over her shoulders, the traditional weight of the ancestral we, preparing her for the binding ceremony that was only 3 sunsets away. In shifter society, a binding was a peaceful merging, a celebration of how 2 patterns could harmonize to better serve the skyroot dome. It was supposed to be serene, but Savaha felt like she was being buried alive in silk and tradition. A soft, rhythmic thrumming vibrated through the floor roots. It was subtle, a frequency only her wolf heart could catch. Then, a low, melodic whistle drifted through the open balcony, the call of a nighthawk. Favian. She didn't wait for permission. She slipped out of the heavy ceremonial robe, leaving her aunts gasping at her sudden, naked defiance, and vaulted over the railing of the root balcony. She landed in the tangled shadow of a great fern, her skin instantly relishing the humid, unfiltered air of the night. A shadow detached itself from the trunk of a massive sky oak. Favian stood there, completely bare, his skin dappled by the moonlight filtering through the dome's canopy. He had that wicked, boyish glint in his twilight eyes, the look of a man who had never met a rule he didn't want to break. As they moved through the lower branches of the sky route toward their secret pool, they passed a pair of night guards on patrol. The guards were clothed in their formal, leaf-woven armor, but seeing 2 high-born shifters in their natural state, the guards instinctively paused. Following the ancient law of courtesy, the guards lowered their heads in a deep, silent bow, acknowledging the sacredness of the shifters' forms and their upcoming union. Favian didn't bow back. He caught Savaha's hand and winked at her, pulling her faster through the brush until the sounds of the village were lost to the hum of the forest. They reached the hidden basin. It was a place of deep, still water, fed by an underground spring cleansed by the dome's natural roots. Without a word, Favian took a running leap, his powerful body arching through the air before he sliced into the water with barely a ripple. Savaha followed, the cool water a shock of reality against the stifling memory of the ambergris oils. She surfaced to find him waiting, treading water in the silver-lit pool. He swam to her, his hands finding her waist beneath the surface, pulling her close until their chests brushed. The playfulness in his eyes had softened into something much heavier, much deeper. "My mother thinks we're practicing our residence chants," Savaha breathed, her hands resting on his wet shoulders. Favian let out a low, gravelly huff of laughter. "I think the only chant I'm interested in is the sound of your breath when we're like this." He leaned in, brushing his nose against hers, his scent, wet stone and wild musk, overwhelming the last of the lilies. "Are you scared? Of the binding?" "Not of being yours," Savaha said, her voice firm. "But the ceremony, it feels like they're trying to domesticate the lightning we felt at the waterfall. They want us to be a harmonious addition to the collective. They want the we to swallow the I." Fabian's grip on her waist tightened, his thumb tracing the curve of her hip with a possessive intensity. "They can chant until their lungs fail, Savaha. They can wrap you in vines and name us servants of the root. But they don't know what we are." He pulled her closer, his voice dropping to a rasp that vibrated in her chest. "Most mates here are like 2 streams joining to make a wider, slower river. But us? We're a storm, little wolf. We're the part of the forest that doesn't want to be mapped. When they bind us in 3 days, they'll think they've achieved a perfect resonance. But they won't hear the secret song we're singing underneath. Savaha tilted her head back, looking up at the towering sky root above them, then back into his stormy eyes. I'm not a good shifter, Favian. I don't want to be a quiet part of a peaceful whole. I want this. I want the reckless, naked truth of you. I know, Fabian whispered, his lips hovering a breath away from hers. That's why I chose the girl who pushed me back into the water. You didn't bow to the legend, you challenged the man. He lifted a hand, dripping with silver water, and touched her heart. In 3 days, the elders will tell us our souls are finally unified. But they're late. I felt the lock click into place the moment your skin touched mine in the mist. He leaned in, finally sealing the distance, and the kiss was nothing like the polite, ceremonial unions of their people. It was a collision of hunger and recognition, a pact made in the dark, cold water that no elder's prayer could ever reach. As they broke apart, breathless, Favian grinned, that boyish, defiant spark returning. Now, race me to the rocks? Or are you too high-born to get your hair tangled in the reeds? Savaha laughed, a wild, rebellious sound that echoed through the trees. She dove deep, her body a blur of motion, leaving the expectations of her parents and the sky root far behind in the silt of the pool. She wasn't just being bound to a mate, she was being anchored to her soul's own rebellion. Chapter 2. The Binding of Two Storms. The sacred heartwood grove hummed with a different kind of energy than the wild pools of the lower levels. Here, among the ancient, gnarled roots that formed the very spine of the sky root dome, the air was thick with the scent of ceremonial resins and the soft, rhythmic chanting of the elders. This was the spiritual heart of the shifters, the place where all things began and returned. Glowing vines, naturally luminescent from the blight's mutations, cast a gentle light weaving through the living canopy. Savaha stood beside Favian, clad in the traditional binding garment, a simple, flowing tunic woven from the luminous threads of the sky root's higher leaves, signifying purity and integration with the ecosystem. Her hair was braided with strands of silver leaf, her face devoid of adornment. Favian, too, wore a similar tunic, his dark hair pulled back from his face. Around them, hundreds of shifters sat in concentric circles, their faces serene, their eyes focused on the central altar, a massive, polished stone slab etched with ancestral carvings. They were not here just to witness, they were here to participate, to lend their collective resonance to the new bond forming, their shifter energies sinking like a living chorus. Savaha's wolf heart chafed against the formality, the stifling weight of expectation. Just last night they had been bare, wild, and defiant in the cool water. Now, they were symbols in this utopian haven where natural evolution and empathy with the earth had healed the scars of the old world. The first voice, the elder of elders, a woman whose skin was as wrinkled as an ancient root and whose eyes held the wisdom of countless generations, began to speak. Her voice was like the soft rustling of leaves, yet it carried across the entire grove on the wind. We stand today upon the enduring legacy of the sky root, she began, her gaze sweeping over the gathered community, a living sanctuary grown from the spirit of our ancestors and the resilience of a world reborn. For generations, we have honored the memory of the Great Blight, the nuclear cataclysm that swallowed the old earth whole. The greed, the isolation, the fractured eye that tore apart the very fabric of existence with wars and radiation. Savaha knew the stories. They were etched into every aspect of shifter life, passed down through oral tales and empathic visions. The old world, Earth, was a shattered memory, a cautionary tale of hubris and individualism run rampant. It was why their entire civilization lived within the gargantuan, naturally evolved dome of the sky root, a self-sustaining ecosystem of massive trees and vines that had grown to protect them from the irradiated wasteland outside. Everyone knew the dome's purpose. It was no secret, but a proud testament to evolution's grace. The shifters had evolved as hybrids of ancient wolf shifters and human empaths, allowing them to shift into various animal forms, wolf for strength, raven for sight, to live in perfect harmony with nature. It was why the we was paramount, why every individual contribution, every connection was seen as strengthening the collective, ensuring that such a disaster would never befall them again. The elder continued, her voice gaining a gentle power. From the ashes of the blight, the first voice spoke, not of conquest, but of unity. They taught us the truth of resonance, the sacred art of mate bonds, not for selfish desire, but to find purpose and belonging greater than the collective soul. A mate bond is the truest path to stabilize harmonic vibrations within oneself, to ensure that each shifter can live to their greatest potential, never lost in the vastness of the communal mind. Savaha heard the words, but her thoughts echoed a different truth. If a shifter didn't find a mate, the collective soul would indeed offer resonance, guiding them to their potential through shared empathic bonds and shifter instincts. But for those like her, who felt the primal tug of individuality, who bristled at being subsumed, a mate wasn't just a guide, they were an anchor, a unique, personal beacon to shine their own light without being swallowed by the greater glow. This was why her bond with Favian felt so vital, so utterly theirs. He didn't smooth her edges for the collective, he sharpened them for her own wild purpose. The mate bond had evolved to be essential, for in a society where everyone accepts being one with nature, merged into the collective flow of the earth and the we, uniqueness comes only from your unique pairing. It is the bond that preserves the sacred I, carving out a personal essence amid the vast, harmonious whole, ensuring no spirit is lost to the greater current. The elder's gaze seemed to settle on them, her eyes twinkling. Each bond is a living testament to our strength. It is a knot in the sky root's living web, yes, but more importantly, it is a shield against the fading of the self, allowing each spirit to burn brightest within the communal light, supported by our evolved harmony with the earth. Savaha felt Fabian shift beside her. His hand, subtly, found hers beneath the folds of their ceremonial tunics, his fingers intertwining with hers. A silent message. They think they know what this is. They don't know what it truly means to us. The ceremony progressed. The resonance chord was played, a deep, haunting note from a crystalline stone instrument that vibrated through the very roots beneath them, meant to align all present with the pure intention of the bonding. The elder performed the weaving of spirit, taking a single silver vine from the sky root's inner branches and encircling their wrists with it, a tangible representation of their entwined destinies, their commitment to the collective, and their unique purpose within it. Savaha of the wolf raven, the first voice intoned, and Favian, guardian of the lower roots. Do you pledge your patterns to each other to stabilize your harmonic vibrations, to unleash your greatest potential, to honor the sky root by preserving the sacred uniqueness of your combined spirits, and to walk in unity until your threads return to the great loom? Savaha met Favian's gaze. His eyes held a flicker of that familiar, defiant spark, quickly veiled by solemn reverence. He was playing his part beautifully. She knew her response was expected to be one of humble joy, of eager acceptance into the greater we. But inside, her defiant wolf heart echoed his unspoken message from the pool. Asterisk, they don't know what this is. This is ours. This is our anchor, not to be lost in their we, but to be found in our us. We do, they spoke in unison, their voices blending, strong and clear, though for Savaha it was a silent vow to him, a promise to maintain their unique, wild harmony within the framework, not to dissolve into it. A communal sigh of contentment rippled through the grove. The elder smiled, her ancient eyes twinkling. Then the sky root rejoices, may your bond be a source of strength for each other, and a beacon of resonance for all shifters. The celebrations lasted through the night, a joyful feast of glowing fruits and sweet root wine, with dances under the vine-lit canopy. Savaha and Favian danced, they laughed, they accepted the blessings of their people, they played the part of the perfectly bonded pair, outwardly embodying the shifter ideal. Yet every touch, every shared glance held the secret knowledge of the storm they truly were, the wild current flowing beneath the placid surface of their societal roles. They slipped away to their new home, a small, intimate grove nestled high in the boughs of the sky root, away from the echoing chants. The silver vine still bound their wrists, but it felt less like a constraint and more like a chosen tether. They lay intertwined, the hum of the sky root a gentle lullaby, their breathing synchronized. 1 year. 365 sunrises and sunsets. A year of shared smiles, of clandestine adventures in the untamed lower roots, of late-night conversations where they planned their private revolutions. A year where Savaha finally, truly knew what it meant to be utterly, completely herself. Because Favian had seen and embraced every untamed part, a year where their bond deepened, weaving itself into the very fabric of her soul, becoming her reason, her anchor, her defiant joy, and the very core of her individual potential, realized not by the collective, but by his side. And then, exactly 1 year to the day of their binding, her world crashed. Chapter 3. The Rite of the 12. The change didn't come with a bang. It came as a hitch in the song. It happened during the evening resonance, when the entire dome hummed together to settle the sky route for the night. Usually the vibration was a perfect, golden chord, carried through the empathic bonds of the shifters. But that evening, a jagged, metallic frequency pierced through. It was cold, it was binary. It felt like the sound of grinding teeth, a distant echo from the wasteland, sensed by the most empathic among them. The elders called it the loom's call. It is a distress signal. The head elder, a woman whose skin was like silvered bark from years of natural aging, announced in the heartwood grove. From the synapse spire, a forgotten colony on the surface, beyond our dome. They are dying. Their air is poisoned by the lingering radiation, and the box people, descendants of those who hid in stone vaults during the blight, are choking on the toxins. They are asking for a gardener, someone who understands how to make things grow in the poison, using our shifter empathy and natural bonds with the earth. Savaha watched Fabian's face. Usually, his eyes were soft, reflecting the green of the canopy. But as the elder spoke of the spire's location, a place no shifter had ventured since the dome's natural growth sealed it, his eyes turned dark, sharp, and focused. Everyone knew the outside world was a nuclear wasteland. It was history, not mystery. But signals like this were rare, a reminder that pockets of humanity clung to life beyond the dome's protective bark. They aren't just dying, Favian whispered to Savaha that night as they sat on the edge of a high root, looking out at the stars through the leafy shield. They are stagnant. A place that can't grow is just a slow-motion grave. If they are reaching out through the empathic winds, it means the silence is breaking. Our ancestors grew this dome to heal Earth, not hide from it forever. Let someone else go, Savaha had said, her voice small. It was a selfish thought, an ego thought, and it tasted like ash in her mouth. Favian took her hand. The loom asked for a gardener who can speak to the spirit of the wood, who can shift and adapt to the poison through our evolved forms. Who else in the dome has spent 10 cycles studying how the skyroot's roots filter radiation naturally? If I stay, 1,000,000 souls in the spire go quiet. If I go... You go quiet to me, she finished. He didn't argue. He couldn't. In the skyroot, the we always outweighed the I, but for the first time in her life, Savaha felt the I screaming. The Rite of the 12 was announced the next dawn, a grand communal celebration to honor those chosen for outward missions, rare journeys beyond the dome to aid other survivors. The entire dome treated the 12 selected shifters like living saints. Parades of bioluminescent floats wound through the route paths. Empathic visions retold tales of heroic ancestors, and feasts overflowed with genetically enhanced fruits that glowed with inner light. Shifters in animal forms danced in synchronized packs, their howls and cries a symphony of unity and hope. It was the pinnacle of utopian harmony, a reminder that the shifters were Earth's stewards, blending evolution and nature to rebuild the world. But to Savaha, it felt like a funeral procession. She walked beside Favian, her hand in his, as crowds cheered and showered them with flower petals engineered to purify the air. The elders praised the 12 as bridges to the wasteland, but Savaha saw only the dome's exit portal looming, a massive, iris-like gate of reinforced biosteel humming with energy shields. As the rite culminated in the Heartwood Grove, the first voice pulled Favian aside for the ancestral blessing. Savaha listened, her heart pounding as the elder revealed the history of Favian's lineage, the ancestral ravens. Your bloodline traces back to the first shifters post-blight. the elder intoned, evoking empathic visions of black-winged figures scouting the irradiated ruins. They were the scouts who mapped safe paths, shifting into ravens to soar over fallout zones, carrying seeds of the sky root to plant new life. They sacrificed solitude for the we, ensuring our dome's foundation. Now, you carry their legacy to venture out, heal the spire, and perhaps bridge our worlds. Favian nodded, his eyes meeting Savaha's with a mix of pride and sorrow. They were rebels too, he whispered to her later in a stolen moment. Shifting not just to survive, but to defy the wasteland. That's why I have to go. For us. For the future we dreamed of. The rite ended with the 12 stepping through the portal, equipped with portable biosuits and shifter-enhanced resilience. Favian's final kiss lingered on Savaha's lips, a promise of return. But as the gate sealed, the bond in her soul stretched thin, like a root straining toward poisoned soil. The utopia felt hollow without him, and the storm within her began to rage. How does this expanded scene feel? It now takes up more space to build suspense and